Hi everyone, welcome. I think we're gonna give folks until like 4:01 and then we'll start. Okay. Awesome. I think we can get started with some kind of like intro things and then folks will continue to roll in. Hello everybody. My name is Sarah Karp. I work at Mass Audubon. I am also a junior in high school at Acton Bucksburg Regional High School. And I am helping to organize this coalition and kind of serve as one of your like backbone team members today. So today we have our Climate Resilient Schools Organizing Network meeting. We're going to be talking about what makes a great climate resolution. And if you're like, Sarah, I have no idea what a resolution is, great. That's where we're going to start. So just to kind of, if we can go to the next slide, walk you through quickly an overview of kind of what we're doing today. First, we'll do some intros, then we'll kind of ground in like an overview of what this coalition is. I know some of you have like been with us since this summer and like know exactly what this is. And we also have some new faces, and that's great. And then we will head into some breakout sections to actually read a bunch of sample resolutions and kind of talk through like what a resolution is, what the different components are. Then we'll come back, we'll report back and kind of brainstorm together the criteria for a great climate resolution. And then we'll talk about next steps and kind of how you can bring this back to your own teams. So I'll pass. I already introduced myself. I will pass to kind of my other four folks. Sarah, if you want to get us started. And while we are doing that, if you all in the chat want to type in your name and pronouns and where you are calling in from today, that would be awesome.
Jennifer, you're up next, right?
Oh, I think actually, Sarah, were you asking us to introduce ourselves? So I'm Jennifer Feller, and I am the Director of School Programs for Mass Audubon, and I live and hopefully am on the Cambridge district team. My kids go to the Cambridge Public Schools. And now pass it to Emma.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emma Scudder, and I work for Mass Audubon. I am the statewide education project manager and the project manager for Climate Resilient Schools. I'll pass it over to Sarah Ross.
I got it now. Hi, I'm Sarah Ross. I'm a co-founder with Undaunted K-12. Thanks for being here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. So there also are a lot of people that are kind of part of this coalition that are not in the room with us today. And so this slide is sort of just a like smattering of most of the organizations that we have talked to that kind of are participating in this coalition. If you are seeing this and you're like, Sarah, my organization, my logo is not on this slide, that is not because we're like intentionally trying to exclude you. We just don't have your logo and you should send it to us. And then if we can go to the next slide, just to kind of help us visualize a little bit more sort of who is in this coalition and in the room with us or not in the room with us. This is a really cool map of all of the different districts thus far that we have kind of engaged and have folks in. And we are currently tracking kind of who is on what district team in this district tracker that I think someone in a moment can drop the link in the chat, and if not, I can. And so just as a reminder, if you want to kind of, as we continue throughout this meeting, like check that document out and make sure that you are in that document as a person on your team, so that other folks in your district know how to find you, so that we know kind of who is where. That is just a really important core document for us to kind of like keep track of everyone and think about like how we can help this coalition continue to grow. And over to you, Jennifer.
All right, fantastic. So just as a welcome and and a reminder for most of you and an introduction to those who are new, welcome. The purpose of the Climate Resilient Schools Coalition. We are trying to build a diverse coalition that empowers teachers, students, and community members. That's a really important thing to keep in mind, all of those folks, to catalyze rigorous climate education and infrastructure improvements in Massachusetts schools by passing and implementing climate action resolutions at the district level. We are going to work on today, what the heck is a climate action resolution? Okay, and go to the next slide, please. Fantastic. So the question is, how do we do this and when do we do this? And an important thing to keep in mind, and I think where there's been some kind of trying to still figure things out, we come together in these district organizing meetings like today to learn, to share, to move the entire coalition forward. But most of this work that you see here, steps 1 through 6, about how we actually pass these resolutions, happens at the district team level. That's you all working with your neighbors and coworkers and students and teachers and community members on the community level. We have 300 districts in Massachusetts, so it's you all working together on your team level, meeting, we don't know when, totally not to do with us, and then coming back together at these learning sharing meetings where we share what we're doing and move ourselves forward as a group. But all this work about building a team, then we're going to do some research. Who do we need to include in this? Who's got the power in our town to do these things, creating the resolution, and then doing all the work it takes to pass a resolution, and then of course celebrating. That's going to happen in your district teams. All right, and as to why a resolution is the most wonderful way to do this, well, oh no, I'm going to tell you first a little bit about what's coming up, and then we're going to pass it to Sarah Ross, who's going to tell us about why resolution is a great way to do this. So last month, we came together and talked about how do we build a team. Hopefully you went out and found some more folks and they're here today. Welcome. Next slide. Because I think we're not gonna do sharing right now because we don't have time. So today, we're going to talk about what makes a terrific climate resolution. And we're going to get to dive into some that have worked really well and made a very significant impact locally. And then big news that we will talk about at the end. In April, we are going to have an in-person meetup and we get to actually see each other IRL. So that is very exciting. And we will tell you more about that at the end. And now I'm just going to pass it on to Sarah.
Great, thanks. Yeah, hi all. I'm excited to talk about really get into together, have a firsthand experience together with some of these climate resolutions. So there are cities and towns across the country that have started to pass these district level climate resolutions, and we're seeing them be an important first step in catalyzing change. Namely, districts are passing resolution. Those resolutions often call for making a plan, because this is complicated stuff. And then we move from a plan to actual implementation. So that's kind of the cascade that we're trying to excite in our Massachusetts cities and towns. So we're going to use these 5 examples today from cities across the country that have really over just the past few years started to do this work of passing these resolutions. And we're going to really want to develop our understanding of what makes a strong resolution, what makes them a powerful tool and not just a nice words kind of a document. So some of the questions we're going to get into in our groups here as we do bigger groups, what topics does the resolution address? Is it talking just about buildings, or is it also talking about curriculum or food or jobs? So you'll talk with your groups about that. You may talk about, what what topics or groups or needs are not addressed in the resolution? What's left out, you know? We might be talking in our groups about where we see evidence of like a timeline or really specific outcomes, you know, how date certain are these commitments? Is there real useful specificity in these documents or not? Does it include any mechanisms for accountability around when things get done, who's involved, who's charged with doing certain things, you know? So what are kind of the process pieces that we see in these resolutions? And then, you know, we might be interested in, you know, what is resonating with us? What feels like it might resonate with our community members? Because again, you'll see these are from across the country, you know, things that resonate for Salt Lake City might not be the right set of things that are going to resonate with us in our communities and cities and towns. So we're going to go into breakouts and you might get to some of these questions, not all of these questions. Don't worry about it. The point is really for us to have an experience and a conversation together, getting our hands dirty, so to say. So we are so grateful to have a set of facilitators for you for these breakout sessions, for these 5 breakout sessions. First, we're going to have Amy McGuire from Highland Electric. She's going to be moderating or facilitating the discussion about the Salt Lake City District. We're going to have Sarah Karp, our very own, helping out with Portland. Thank you, Sarah. We're going to have another Sarah Bertrand, also from Mass Audubon, helping us pick apart the Dallas resolution. Evan Bell kindly volunteered to lead us to dig into San Diego. So some of you will be with Evan. And then lastly, we have another superstar from Mass Audubon, Mina, who's going to lead us through on Miami-Dade and their resolution. So when you get in your groups, you know, the first time you talk, so we may not have time to go around and do introductions, you know, facilitator's choice here. But if it feels like too big a group to go around to introductions, no problem. But certainly the first time you talk, you may want to identify yourself. You can also use the rename function. So like some of us have done here, we've renamed ourselves with our pronouns. The district that you are, you know, contemplating bringing a resolution to, and maybe your role, you know, you're a parent, you're an advocate, you're a teacher, you know, take that as you will. So yeah, we're going to go into these breakout rooms. You're going to have about 25-30 minutes. So it's a good amount of time to get into these set of questions. Then we're going to come back together and we're not going to try and summarize everything we talked about, but we're going to ask for some highlights from either your facilitator or a volunteer from your group to really report back. Emma, how are we doing with your magic on the breakout rooms?
The magic is complete, and I'm going to open the rooms now if we're ready to go.
I think we're ready to go.
All right.
Cool.
I'll be in the main room. If anyone needs to, you can move yourself back.
Welcome back. We had a great conversation in our small breakout group. I hope you all did too. We're going to go around and do some quick report backs. We'd love to hear from each of the groups. You know, it's a lot to try and summarize 5 big meaty questions that we gave you all. You may not have got to all of them. That's fine. And so I would ask each of our moderators to think about just picking out a few nuggets and maybe, you know, what struck you as one of the biggest strengths maybe of your resolution might be one thing to think about for the moderators. Why don't I start with Amy McGuire and her group that talked about the Salt Lake City School District. Amy, thank you so much for being willing to facilitate a group about the Salt Lake City resolution. It was fun. I got to see some of the Salt Lake City folks out at the recent Green Schools Conference, and they talked about this resolution. So I have some insider knowledge, but tell me, what did your group, in a few minutes, tell me, what did your group think was one of the greatest resolutions, or just something notable that you guys really dug in on with the Salt Lake City resolution?
Yeah, we had a great conversation. Thank you for inviting me to join this event, or allowing me to participate, I guess. It's wonderful to be here. So in our group, admittedly, we didn't get all the way through the questions, but did have some good conversation. I think to your question at the top, as far as like what are the key, like high level, really great things that we see in this, I think the actionable, so very clear goal and actionable targets at the top is it makes it a clear target to hit, and I think we agreed that that's can be really beneficial to have these sort of longer term. For example, in Salt Lake, it's 100% clean renewable energy by 2030, and 100% all district operations with carbon neutral energy by 2040. So some really key sort of a little bit further out targets, but enough that you really have to start moving. The pieces that we did get a conversation around were, you know, what were the topics that were included as opposed to maybe not addressed, or that might be different in Massachusetts as opposed to Utah, which was a good point of discussion. Obviously, there's from many differences between Massachusetts and Utah, and you know, some of the districts. Arlington was represented twice, so thank you, Allie, for joining me from Arlington, Mass. Very different from Salt Lake. The energy mix came up. So when we're talking about what is clean renewable energy, that's an important thing to consider when we're putting forward our resolutions or thinking about them to propose them. The clarification, and this, I think we got to it. We were thinking carefully about new buildings versus existing building considerations. They did touch on that, which is great. I'll admit to mentioning this myself, but transportation wasn't specifically called out. And I think I had agreement from the group that could be important to include in the envelope of the climate impact of a school district. And then the education, particularly health education, as an important component for ensuring that the benefits of the efforts are identified, recognized, I guess, by the broader community, would be a very valuable piece, as well as we had Shannon on our group sort of laying out, you know, there's significant public health impacts of all of the sort of any fossil fuel oriented activity. So monitoring that, discussing it, reporting out on it is going to be really important as we make changes.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much for that. That was cool. So it sounds like there's a lot of focus on the infrastructure side in that resolution too, which I think makes connects with what I remember that resolution. So let's move to farther on the West Coast, out in Portland. Sarah Karp, you guys had a chat around the Portland Public Schools resolution, which is quite meaty and expansive and features some concepts like climate justice, which don't necessarily make it into all of them.
Yeah.
Tell us, you know, what stood out to your group as a particular strength? Where's the conversation headed within your small group?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that all of us noticed, like almost immediately from looking at it, is that there are no whereases in the Portland resolution. Like the actual kind of formatting is very different from the other four. And we all liked that way better. Like I think that it is a lot more kind of readable. As Sarah said, like there are, you know, it covers a lot. So it covers both kind of like mitigation / emissions in one bucket or pillar, as they call it. And then there's this whole other bucket that is around both curriculum and then also kind of like student wellness that starts to bring in sort of more of the like mental health, public health aspects. But it just like does a very nice job of like using accessible language and kind of like an accessible breakdown that I think is like pretty easy for folks to understand. So I definitely think that if you are looking at like, how do I make my resolution less like policy language that's hard to understand, I definitely would like take a read through the Portland resolution.
Can I just make a quick note on that? It's So it's interesting because this is a policy, it's not a resolution. So that is just one flag, and that's connected to the governance model that Portland had at the time and that they kind of shifted. So it is kind of, that one is slightly a different beast, but resolutions do tend to stick to that format of whereas, and let it therefore be
Yeah.
resolved.
Yeah, and I think like we had a whole discussion on sort of the importance of like researching what policy looks like in your town with your like city or town governance structure. And kind of we're talking about like the overlap with like town sustainability and just how like it's important to kind of do your research in that area.
Cool, great. Okay, moving along to Dallas, an interesting example, one that's very, very different from some of the other ones that we had in the crew here for its own reasons. Another Sarah, we're just all doing the Sarah's thing here today. Sarah Bertrand led that discussion. What can you guys tell us about the Dallas resolution? Different beast, huh?
Yeah, and Steven's gonna share out for us.
Oh, great.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah. So the first thing we noticed was that it's very broad, and it sounds like kind of the entry point into this conversation. So the whereas statements were informative, educational, perhaps, and gives a guidance for that folks can refer back to when they're doing the work. The big takeaway from the resolution was that it forms this committee that will report back in 6 months. Our question was, and so it doesn't really define what the priority areas are. It's really seeking to stakeholder and determine what the priority areas are. We thought that the union being involved was a very positive call out, and, something that we should definitely replicate here, whether it be teachers unions, custodial, nurses. But the other piece that's really important for Massachusetts is identifying who are the decision makers and making sure they're part of that committee, because a lot of work can go into a report and the decision makers can say thank you and put it to the side and nothing happens. So in Massachusetts, and a lot of school committees in our districts, infrastructure, capital, playgrounds, buildings are controlled by either the city council, town council, or the administration. So making sure those decision makers are at the table and bought in would be really important.
Great.
So
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sam. I appreciate it. Evan, are you going to do a report out for your group, or are you going to have someone else?
I can report out quickly on behalf of the group.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, we reviewed San Diego resolution. Some of the key things that stood out to us were the fact that the whereas statements built a pretty compelling story about the successes in San Diego, while also reminding the counselors of the time-bound commitments they've already made, especially on electrification. They named some like very specific numbers on like, here's all the good stuff you've done. And so when it came to the Be It Resolved, they had, that little bit of legitimacy to ask for some really ambitious things on electrification. Something we noticed, though, is it didn't go too deep into, school sustainability measures like composting, greening school grounds, and the only curriculum change was green jobs additions rather than, some of the climate change stuff we've been talking about. So we then had a conversation a lot around like, who's the audience? Who are the people in the city council, and who are the people, in your community who'd be impacted by this, and making sure that we have like the right kind of ambition and also use the right kind of language so people can understand and interact with the resolutions we're trying to pass.
Superb. Thank you. Okay, Mina, you're going to round us out from our group talking about Miami-Dade. Certainly another community on the front lines of climate change and rising sea levels. So tell us, what did we talk about?
Yeah, so our group, we're talking about Miami-Dade, and the whereas statements definitely, it kind of was started off big and got more specific. One thing that I think might be unique about ours, or that was interesting to us, was kind of the focus on the cost of energy for schools, right? Utility costs. What does, what burden does that kind of bring, and how can like how can we save money on that and then redirect funds to better support students on the climate front. And so I thought that, and we thought that angle was interesting. And we talked about like what context that might have come out of, right? And this particular location, how can that apply to our context? And we also talked a lot about, basically a big part of their kind of conclusion and resolution was establishing a task force that brings together different kinds of folks from, the community and the schools to kind of work on climate and energy and stuff. And so we talked about what that would look like, right? And the importance of community involvement. What does that mean? Talking about our specific communities, where are there tensions, right? What can we sort of anticipate happening in our communities? And what voices would we want to make sure are sort of accounted for in this work? So yeah, we talked a lot about kind of, what it means to represent our community members as well in this process.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you all to our facilitators. Thanks to all of you for engaging in these robust conversations. All of these resolutions are, if you're curious about some of the other resolutions that you didn't get to dig into, they're all on our webpage at the bottom. We have the school board toolkit, and all 5 of these resolutions are linked below. We are going to jump over now, and I'm going to pass it off to Jennifer to kind of round out some of what you all talked about, what makes a great climate resolution.
Yeah. So oh, it didn't add, but that's all right. So I'm going to add one more thing, one more element that the group came up with. Essentially, it will be up to each district team to figure out, what are we asking for? What's going to be in our resolution? They will all be different across Massachusetts, depending on the structure of your school board / town, who makes decisions in your town and about what, depending on what policies have already been passed in your town that you can refer to or work with, what you think might pass. The politics of your town are going to be very specific. And then, what you want as a team. So within that, there are elements that, as you identified, make a stronger resolution rather than one that's pretty weak. It should be specific so that we can't say exactly what everybody's going to do for the next 10 years. That's never going to work. But it should be clear about what they're going for, what you're going for, what will get done. So that's the what. And the what might be that we form a committee to make a plan, and the plan must include these elements and by this time. That could be the what. Again, by a certain time. It is time certain. There are deadlines. There are commitments by a certain time, that things happen by a certain time is very important. And it should also say who's going to do those things. There's a process. What's happening? How are we going to make sure this happens? Who's accountable and by when? And then part of that process also includes community participation. The inclusion aspect is clearly laid out. Otherwise, who's doing it? And is it the folks who are already on the school board, or maybe we want some input from all the different community members that folks have mentioned here? Could be unions, nurses, students, teachers, all sorts of different community partners, maybe facilities people in the town. And then that it is connected to the local priorities, as we said before. And the last one that you all surfaced that I think is an important one to point out is that it is well researched. It is the right ask to the right people, because you can bring a wonderful resolution to people who do not have any power to act on that resolution. And that's not that helpful. So we want to research carefully who decides in our town and what's already been done. How can we build on that? Okay, I'm going to pass it off to Sarah Karp.
Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you, everybody. Again, just for like taking an hour out of your Tuesday to like come talk with us about this. We're really excited. Kind of thinking about just like where we go from here. I think not on this slide, but I think today has been a lot of information thrown at you. And so I think for all of us, like taking just some time to like synthesize and like read over the notes and like read over other resolutions if that's something that you want to do, can be helpful. Next steps for the most part, though, is really about assessing where you are in the process and what you need next. And so that could be, you know, hey, this is super cool. I'm excited to do it. I don't have a team yet. And so your next step could be, you know, finding other people in your district, adding them to the coalition directory, holding an initial meeting to like get to know each other and sort of start to like build that team. A next step could also be learning more, coming to the CRS meetup at the MIT Climate Conference, and also sort of exploring more resources that we'll link. And then the third sort of next step is just around getting support. And I really do encourage, if you are looking at this and you're like, Sarah Karp, I have no idea what I'm going to do next week. That is like fine, and we're here to help. And I would encourage you to drop into co-working for 5 minutes that I'm hosting, and we can like talk about kind of where you're going next. You also can join the Slack at this link. You can DM me, you can ask questions in the channel. And yeah, you know, we want to be having conversations, and we want to be helpful in whatever way that means for you. And I'll pass it to Emma to close us out.
Thank you, Sarah. And I'll just echo Sarah's gratitude to everyone for being here today. It sounds like some fantastic discussions happened. And to keep that momentum going, we want to see you again. And we have an opportunity to all meet up in person, which is very exciting. So in lieu of next month's organizing network meeting, we are going to have an in-person meetup at MIT's Climate Action and Education Conference. It's all day on Saturday, April 6th. So I really hope you can make it. I just shared the registration link in the chat, and it's also at the end of our notes from today. So it's free. Quickly go ahead and register for that. We hope we can see you there. And in addition, Sarah Karp is going to be hosting an open co-working hour on Wednesday, March 27th. And that's a great place to bring your questions, to hear where other people are at, to bounce ideas off of each other, and just keep the momentum going.
And I do want to mention that there's a note in the chat that there was some confusion with registration. It said, oh, only educators are allowed. And so we're going to kind of look into that and let everyone know. But I think everyone here should be eligible to go, especially to this Climate Resilient Schools Coalition meetup, which we will make sure everyone can get to.
Yeah, the conference is wide open.
Oh, good. Okay.
Well, Sarah, I'm on the registration page right now. It says you have to make a choice, either educator K-8, 9 to 12, or student without guardian. So those are the only choices. So it doesn't have a choice for a community member.
Okay, we'll make sure they get that information and we will fix it. That is excellent. Yeah, guardian without student. Hey, what's going on? We'll fix it. Or we'll make sure it gets open.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
all so
you,
much
everyone.
for being here. Have a great afternoon.
Take care. Thank you.